Hello, Martine Santerre here with Soul Being, and today I am here with Jason Gootman, who is a wellness coach. Jason, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So Jason, what is your personal experience and how did you become a coach? Because you have a really interesting story.
It is interesting and it's intense.
Okay.
I've told it so many times to me that I think I have it in a way that I can sort of bullet point it.
Okay.
And it really started when I was an overweight teenager, which most people who meet me as an adult are like, they don't believe it.
I couldn't quite visualize that. Yep.
And
so you're a chubby kid.
Yeah. And as you can imagine, that was difficult. It was like adolescence. It was that time when you want to feel good about yourself and all of that. And I didn't get a lot of support from my parents or my community, and I sort of turned that inward and became a sort of an exercise animal. I was already getting into high school sports, and but I really overdid that. And high school sports became something for me to excel at, but also it was a way for me to sort of hide what eventually became an exercise addiction.
Interesting. Okay, so was it about like control for you? Is that why you think you made that extreme switch?
I think it was as it is for a lot of people with body image challenges, it was both a control thing, and it was, for me, I felt like if I could have a perfect body, both in aesthetics and performance, then that sort of would undo the fact that I thought I had a deplorable body
before. So it's like how you feel about yourself.
And to me, it's kind of fast forward. By the time I was 25, I had become a high-level world-class triathlete, which I always tell people sounds awesome.
But that's the intense part that you're talking about.
Right. Yeah, because that sport rewards someone who has that kind of commitment / for me, it was truly an addiction.
Sure.
And but I really crashed at that time.
What does the crash look like in that scenario?
Yeah, it was complete chronic fatigue. Burnout, some musculoskeletal injuries. And frankly, that was a depressing time as well. Really, it was complete system shutdown. And then what I did at that time in my life was, I remember sitting, reflecting, and I knew right away that I got to fix this mess, which was this physical mess. But I knew there was something off inside of me. It was the first time in my life I questioned, well, why am I doing all this stuff?
Good question.
It was
a really big question.
A big question, and I didn't answer it quickly. But it does get to your original question. That's how I became a wellness coach, because what I did at that time is I realized that I needed to be well, and I realized that yes, first I needed to, or not first, but along with that inner wellness, what I now call inner wellness, and that relationship with myself, I did need to learn what it really took to be well, and. To make a long story short, in that process, I realized this is what I really have to offer people, to help them in a similar journey.
Sure, and to navigate that process for themselves.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. So what is your approach and philosophy to coaching then, coming from that experience?
Yeah, I mean, really, I sort of have a 4-part approach. Number one, stemming from the earliest learning was that exercise is something to be enjoyed. I immediately transitioned in my life from exercise being a chore or a task to being play.
And being fun.
That's something I really teach. And
so
then,
like if you don't like to run on the treadmill, don't run on the treadmill. Do something different.
100%.
Yeah.
I often, when someone says to me, "What's the best form of exercise for me?" my question always back is, "What do you like to do?" And then we go from there.
Sure.
With eating, similarly. So during all that time, eating was a way to fuel my body. And in a sport that valued leanness and all that stuff, it was to some degree about restriction and having low body fat percentage and all that kind of stuff. And I really had to turn that on its head as well, and to really come to rethink of food as nourishment. So that really shapes, how I approach helping people with eating. And then the third part that I learned during that time was that there's much more to well-being than exercise and nutrition. I needed to learn how to sleep more. I needed to learn rest. When you're trying to heal from something like that, you learn quickly about stress and how stress affects your body negatively. And so your first foray is into what people might call like stress management. And that's like the tip of the iceberg, because then you start to look at yourself and you're like, where's my stress coming from? And the big arenas for me, which I think are similar to most people, are work, money, that kind of stuff, and relationships.
Yeah.
So I had to transform that area of my life, right?
Yeah.
And so that's sort of the third part of my approach to wellness, is that exercise and nutrition are a small part of the game, and it's really about meeting all of one's needs as a person. This is a neat little story that illustrates this. I was on a walk with a friend 15 years or so ago, and it was a beautiful place, and I said, "Isn't it nourishing to be out here in the woods?" And she stopped and she was like, "I love the use of the word nourishing for things other than food." And
that's really interesting, yeah.
And that's when it occurred to me that this is the approach to wellness. It's not about doing things to ourselves. It's about doing things for ourselves. And sort of nourishing ourselves with movement, nourishing ourselves with food, and nourishing ourselves with life. That's a tagline I use for the business, is nourishing movement, nourishing food, nourishing life. And then the fourth and final part of my approach to coaching is that outer wellness is built on a foundation of inner wellness. And that inner wellness is your relationship with yourself. It's the somewhat corny term, especially for a man to say. It's self-love. And to me, I don't find it to be a male term or a female term or a young term or an old term. It simply means being in harmony with oneself. And
that's a great way of simplifying
and treating oneself well.
Great. Thank you. So you and I have spoken before about you being 3 coaches in one as a wellness coach. Can you tell us what you mean by that? What is it about the way that you work that is 3 coaches in one?
Right. It's a good question.
Who's that a good fit for?
Yeah. So in those years where I was a high-level athlete, I also went to college and graduate school and studied exercise physiology, became a certified sports nutritionist. So
and you have your master's as well, right?
So yes, master's in exercise physiology. And my first job out of school was as a physiology researcher, so I'm deep into the science of all this stuff. But quickly I wanted to work for myself, and it was still in my athletic years, and so I became a triathlon coach and was running a business as a triathlon coach. But when I decided to leave all that work behind and become a wellness coach, I realized that telling people what to do with exercise and nutrition didn't work so well. And I started becoming...
Like a drill sergeant, like you will do this and then you will lose this weight. Like that type of...
Like that, or someone comes to you and essentially asks the question, which I still get asked to this day, you tell me what to do. And tell me what to do and I'll do it is kind of what a person will say. Well,
everybody's different though. They want,
it's funny because I think people think they want that, but ultimately they don't.
They don't,
And so guidance. I was very frustrated in that realm because I wasn't able to make the kind of changes I want, help people with the kind of changes they wanted to make. And that's when I started studying coaching. And I had some other coaches in my life that were good influences. And coaching is really the art and science of behavior change and habit formation. So I really was determined that I have all this knowledge in exercise science, I have all this knowledge in nutrition, but I've got to put it together with the tools and abilities that help people put it in place. Because I was really frustrated by that truly dysfunctional relationship of you come to me, you tell me to tell you what to do basically, and then I make you these detailed plans, which took a lot of time, and you'd come back and say, I didn't really do so much of it. And there was another...
you actually didn't follow the plan even though you put the investment into it of time. And then they probably weren't feeling like they had the results that they wanted.
That's right. And so what was off is that we don't do things well because people tell us to do them. We do things well when they're in line with our highest values. And one of the main tenets of coaching is to help a person get in touch with their personal values.
What's important to them.
Yes, absolutely.
That's sweet.
There's another interesting element here which I think is useful, is people didn't just come back, and this happens every day in wellness settings. They don't just come back and say, I didn't do it. There's often a level of guilt and shame in this dynamic. And that I didn't like at all.
They feel bad that they just, sorry, no, you wrote this plan for me. I didn't do any of it. But
and sorry was a big part of it. And I often joke that I felt like I was their priest. And I was like, I didn't get into this to be a priest.
And you don't owe me an apology. This is all for you in the first place.
That's right. And so coaching gives you the tools to work in a very peer-to-peer relationship. One of the great tenets of coaching is that a person is naturally creative and resourceful, which means that a person can solve their own problems and can create the life that they want to create on their own. Okay. And a coach's job is to guide them in that process.
Great. So it's really about creating lasting lifestyle change that you're helping them with.
Well, it's a really good distinction, because what you get in nutrition and exercise science services, if you're not careful, are you get quick fixes.
Sure.
You know, you get programs.
Yes.
I like to make the distinction between the turning point in anyone's transformation in becoming a healthier, happier person is when they consider when they decide this is my lifestyle.
Yeah, it's no longer something they're trying to do, they just do it.
If you're seeking a program, whether it's 12 weeks or 16 weeks or whatever, and you know there's a graduation, you're not fully invested in this is how I'm going to live my life. And once you turn that corner, you make a lot better progress.
Wonderful. I want to say here, we had actually, there was two things we were going to talk about, the motivational interviewing.
Yeah.
We mentioned that. Can you maybe talk a little bit about that in terms of
these are sort of
your philosophy?
Yeah, two things that I've studied and practiced deeply that really helped me in my coaching. One is called self-determination theory.
Okay,
self-determination theory, the best quick explanation.
The Cliff Notes version
the
of that.
Cliff Notes is that's where, if anybody's heard of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation.
Yes.
And so intrinsic motivation means we're doing something for ourselves because it's really important to us. So that's a guiding tenet in everything that I do, is I help a person get into their intrinsic motivation. I couple that with a tool called motivational interviewing, and it's a beautiful marriage, to use that cliche, because what motivational interviewing is essentially, it's a conversation style that is the opposite of being a drill sergeant.
Okay.
The primary tenet, the Cliff Notes of motivational interviewing, is you ask open-ended questions with curiosity. So a client comes to me and...
Yeah, give us an example of one.
Yeah, and someone's ready to change their eating pattern for that week, and we're devising maybe a specific part of that, how they're going to do for breakfasts. I might ask, what are your favorite breakfast foods? And let them tell me that.
Okay.
And then as we get into the nutrition planning, it's based on an answer they gave.
Sure. Donuts, pancakes, waffles.
Sometimes I get that. But if we look far enough, then I would honestly, that happens. I would ask what are your favorite breakfast foods that you would also consider to be nourishing?
Okay.
And everyone, except maybe my dad, would come back with an answer like, I really like eggs, or I really like avocados, and we can find some
middle ground.
Yes,
okay, that's great.
And what happens is when you ask people questions about their well-being and you let them answer, they have buy-in, they have investment.
Yeah.
So much so that even when in a typical hour session with a person, we spend about 45 minutes working through their challenges and their goals. And then in the last 15 minutes, we make what I call their Thrive plan, which is their wellness plan. And we co-create that. So
they're really participating.
I'm essentially asking them in the next 2 weeks, next couple weeks, how do we want to set up your eating plan?
Yeah.
And I let them answer it. And this buy-in is sort of like how we take better care of a home when we own it than when we rent it.
Yes.
Because this is now their plan. This isn't. And I'm very careful.
They're invested in it. Yeah.
I'm very careful even with the language I use. So I essentially write all this down and create it and email it to them after our sessions together. But I'll call it doesn't say your wellness plan, it says my wellness plan. It's a subtle little thing, but I find it really helpful.
That's great.
Yeah.
So with that, I think that's a good segue in understanding how long you coach someone for. What does a typical engagement look like with you under that my plan?
Yeah. So my personal wellness coaching program, I set it up as a 6-month coaching program. That means we're invested in working together for 6 months, and we have a session together. I can do these in person for a local person, and I do them often via Skype with people that are not local. We do 2 of those every month, so almost basically every other week.
Okay.
In those sessions, we work, like I said, work through challenges and set new goals and make a wellness plan. That includes an eating plan, an exercise plan, an overall self-care plan, everything that's relevant to that person at that time. And then the person has 24/7 ability to call, text, email.
Reach out and get support from you.
Yeah, and that's an integral part of this, because it's neat that we're getting together every 2 weeks, but people will stumble People will stumble.
Can happen in 2 weeks.
Yes. Yeah. And I would rather nip the stumbles in the bud when they happen, because then they have a short period of struggling in creating these new habits, as opposed to dragging it out for 10 days or 2 weeks.
Yeah. Like I didn't want to tell you because I couldn't get a hold of you, and then you've fallen off the wagon or something.
And so and there's a personal part of this relationship too. Is I like to say that people don't transform in a vacuum. So this allows the person to feel like I'm their coach. Another word could be mentor. I sometimes use the word wellness Sherpa.
Okay.
Because this is a journey they're on. It's a journey that I've already been on.
Yep.
And I've been on with many people, and they're doing it. They're not going to get up the mountain. I'm not going to carry them, but I'm going to. I have a lot of experience. I know the pitfalls. I know the hurdles, and I help them along the way.
That's wonderful. Yeah. And so then the vision is then at the end of the 6 months, that person the new behavior is in place, and they're able to continue on without your support, even though they may still be friends with you. But is that kind of the idea, is that you're really helping them, and that's part of the reason that it's the duration is what it is, so that they can really embed those new lifestyle behaviors and go forward. Yeah,
I mean, we are after autonomy, right? Like, I don't consider the work I do successful if a person can't do it without me. And we hear this, someone will say to me I know what I need to do. I need to go back to the gym and have that personal trainer kick my butt. Or I need to go back on that diet. And when they're on it, they're good. But when they're not on one of these programs, they're not doing so well. And
people have experienced that.
And so that's why I've created the 6-month program, because if someone were to come to me for 1 session or 2 sessions or 3 sessions, we can make a little progress. But typically, if they don't stick to it longer than that, the change doesn't stick. Doesn't last. So that's really what we're after. Is what's the biblical expression? I don't give them fish. I teach them how to fish.
Yes. And they can feed themselves for the rest of their lives.
That's right.
All right. Awesome. So kind of switching gears now to you personally, and you shared with us your really interesting background. What are your personal mindful living practices? What do you do to take care of and nourish yourself? Yeah,
and you and I have had the chance to talk about this, and it's really fun for me. So I do have some of the structured habits that many people have.
Do you eat donuts?
I'll delve into that. So like, I really, really, really eat well.
Yeah.
But for me, it's not a discipline.
Sure.
Like, I truly enjoy whole, natural, real food, and I'm a decent amateur cook. And so I honestly, some people get annoyed at this. I don't have much of a pull at this point in my life to junk food kind of stuff. I say, in kind of answer some of your question, that a big part of eating well are not, like, even though I have that nutrition background, it's not nutrition knowledge. It's not knowing what carbs are, or what fat is, or what protein is, or micronutrients. I go to the farmer's market in Portland here almost every Saturday. And to me, that's like part of my wellness life. But it's also social. Get outdoors when it's outdoors. So that's one. But probably my most interesting mindful living practice is, I call it, sometimes paraphrase it as eat when I'm hungry, sleep when I'm tired. And what I mean by that is, it's the opposite of rigidity. We learn a lot of, there's a boom in like biohacking or body hacking, right? And I'm sort of anti-hacking. I think we're people, because we are people, right? And I find that stuff a little inhumane. And I steal a little from some Eastern traditions that are more about going with the flow of life. And I think, I sometimes joke that our bodies are the greatest wellness coach that any of us could ever have, because they tell us what we need.
Exactly, if we're paying attention and we're tuned in.
And that's what mindfulness is, right? We really do have these great signals in us that tell us when we're hungry, when we've had enough to eat, when we're tired, when we're energetic. And one of the big keys to becoming a mature, integrated adult who takes care of him or herself really well is to follow those leads.
Listen to your body.
And to really feel you deserve to do that. There are plenty of people who know I'm not getting enough sleep this week, but continue to do so. And a lot of the coaching work lies in the why. What, to be a little bit blunt and frank about this, those are actually self-destructive tendencies.
That's a fair point.
And we poo-poo that a little bit of like, no.
You're not being a martyr by like continuing to
Right.
treat yourself in
and
that way.
So that's a deep topic to get into, but that's something that is a personal living practice of mine that I definitely also work to impart on people.
Okay, wonderful. So lastly, you have a really cool blog, and you take kind of that art and science and mix it in the conversation that you have with your audience. Tell us about your writing and how all this approach has affected that, and about your blog.
Well, I think one thing that's interesting is it for me personally, it's an outlet. Wellness is my life's work, and so in my writing I get to share information from scientific studies. I sort of weave information from scientific studies with my personal experiences, with obviously confidential but experiences with clients.
Yeah.
And I put out an article once a week, and I think for people who are interested in delving deeper into my approach, my articles are a good way to gain some of that perspective. And even if you were not looking to gain some insight and perspective, I personally think they're fun.
They are very fun to read. I would highly recommend them. Wonderful. Well, Jason, thank you so much for being with us today. Again, Jason Gootman, who's a wellness coach. To get in touch with Jason, visit us at soulbeing.com. Have an amazing day. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.